righty. How is everybody doing today? Thank you so much for joining. Another live episode of This Week in Drones coming at you every Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern. And we're here to create meaningful conversation and progress the drone industry in general, integrating drones into the national airspace, but also the sort of counter drone side of what about the drones that are not supposed to be there, and how do we deal with that, and how do we navigate and understand everything that's in the airspace. And something that is right on topic today about public safety drones that we were just chatting about backstage is, what happens when there's all sorts of drones in the air, hundreds, thousands, maybe. This one's delivering an Amazon package, and that one's responding to a 911 call, and how do we understand who's who and how they work together and give appropriate right of way to each other, etc. So we're going to get into that a little bit today. And the broad topic is going to be about solving through some of the complexities of scaling a public safety drone program. And of course, policy that I just alluded to is a major one. We're going to also touch on a couple other more kind of technology focused and public relation focused complexities. How do we fly drones safely in more complex airspace near GA airports and hospitals with helipads and make sure we're deconflicting? How do we fly at these stadiums where there's so much frequency activity and things going on, it's hard to keep connectivity to the drones? So we'll kind of hash through some of these one at a time, and we are live right now. So if you're out there, throw us a comment, say hi. Would love to acknowledge you as I see you pop up there. And then if you have questions for this panel as we're going through, we've got some amazing people here with insights across the board around public safety and drones. If you have thoughts, questions for the panel, please type them in right now, send them over. I'll see those come through and we'll pull those up as well, and we'll chat through them. So with that said, I will do some more deep dive introductions, but of course we have Michelle Duquette with 3 Mad Air. And I'm going to ask her to say a few words here in a minute, but she's an incredible consultant in the industry, helping large, whole groups of people, all these different stakeholders in cities to work together and create these drone ecosystems, which has really been fun to see and be part of. And of course, Robb Monkman with TEAL Communications. Thanks so much for joining us again today, Robb. And Robb's going to bring some insights around that connectivity challenge of all the frequencies and all the things going on in these dense air, environments, and how TEAL and some of the technologies are solving through that. I'll let you kind of dive into that in a little bit here. And then Charles Werner, of course, drone responders, just an incredible industry advocate amongst many other roles that he plays. And he's going to bring some insights, some thoughts as he kind of spearheads the message that the law enforcement, public safety, basically is accumulating the thoughts and the comments to go forward from public safety as the FAA is finalizing some policies and some rules right now that we're all talking about at length. But he's the guy. I want him to share a little bit about that here in a minute. And also, if you have thoughts, if you have questions that you want to actually roll up to legislators before these rules are finalized, talk to Charles, please. And then, of course, Don Redman with Brink Drones, delivering the physical drone itself to law enforcement agencies that they're using to dispatch out for responding to 911 calls. And so I wanted to have just kind of a plethora of perspectives and angles here that we can kind of pass through and solve through. And then, hey, Andrew Bowen, thanks for shouting out as well. And anyone out there, feel free to kind of message in as we're live. So with that, I think kind of in that order, Michelle, could you just maybe do a brief introduction, but I'd like you to give us some of that context that you just shared with us backstage, so people can be thinking with the right lens as we kind of move through this, and then I'll pass it to Robb here in a second after that.
Sure. So hi everybody, thanks for joining us again. Today I'm in a little bit different mindset than I have been in the last several episodes, and it's because of a thought leadership summit that Charles and I attended earlier this week from UVA. It was very enlightening, and I walked away with a much firmer belief that we've been going about this the wrong way. We have been trying to assume public safety into regulatory structures that we're still creating for, like, the defense folks and national security or commercial operations. And the fact is starting to become much clearer to me that it's a square peg round hole situation, and that public safety has enough nuances to it, to its tactical and dynamic environment that we really need to start respecting those nuances and looking at them as an independent voice that also needs its own independent policy. So I am going to be looking at this from that lens. Now, you all know that I am still the biggest advocate for interoperability. So what I'm not suggesting is yet another stovepipe. I am suggesting that there are opportunities for a different way to look at allowances and authorizations and approvals for this community that also are conducive to seamless communications with both the commercial industry and national security and defense. So that's going to be the lens that I'm going to have today.
Love it. Appreciate that, Michelle. Robb Monkman, I'd love for you to share, say hi, share who you are. Thank you so much for making this episode possible.
Well, thank you in advance for that plug, and thanks for the opportunity to join the show today. Yep. So Robb Monkman, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at TEAL, not to be confused with TEAL drones, which happens quite frequently. At TEAL, we're actually on the connectivity side of things, and so that's what I can talk about today, the small piece of the puzzle that we're helping to solve here at TEAL. We really are in the business of helping companies like Brink and others who need to deploy their assets quickly, securely, and connect onto networks reliably. So for us, some of the things that we can talk about today as it relates to DFR and towards first responders, especially in urban and suburban environments, really is around connectivity. I mean, connectivity can be one of these big hurdles to completing the mission. And a lot of drone companies that we talk to are relying on RF today, and RF is great. And the reality, though, is that if you run into an RF wall in a big city, your mission's done. So if you think of a big city like Seattle or New York, and there's tall buildings, there's other obstacles, and RF can be blocked, it can be jammed. You really need to make sure that your drone operations can continue, especially if it's mission critical, which is what we're talking about today. And so, we're obviously on the cellular network orchestration side of things, but for us, we're not trying to replace RF. And in some areas, we're not trying to replace satellite. For us, it's an and, it's not an or. And at the end of the day, it's about failover and redundancy. Drones as first responders they're collecting a lot of data, particularly video for surveillance. They're trying to provide that situational awareness to first responders that need to be able to make decisions and act. And if that gets interrupted and the operator doesn't receive that video feed, there's a risk that you could send too many resources to an area. There's a risk that you could send first responders into risky environments. And so, we're another lane, so to speak, beyond RF, beyond satellite, for cellular, which is really tailored well for city, urban, suburban
Good, Rob.
environment.
Yeah, and I remember talking to the guys in NYPD and the issues at Times Square. They were like talking about, the fiber connected drones that they're using in Ukraine and asking questions about like, can we get a hold of one of those? Because that would work. But then it's like, what are the logistics of, you can't apparently recoil those when you want to fly back. You're going to just drop it on the crowd and stuff. It was a pretty funny conversation I remember having recently. But Don, I'd love for you to just share who you are, what you guys do, and then just based on some of the comments already made, if maybe there's some moments you were kind of nodding, I'm curious to hear from you as like an actual, I don't know if you call yourself an operator, but I'm kind of thinking of you at least wearing that hat in my head of like someone who understands what happens when you're actually launching the drone and flying it out into these real world environments. If you have just some thoughts, some context, and then we'll pass it to Charles.
Yeah, so Don Redmond, VP of DFR at Brink Drones. I'm a retired police captain from Chula Vista Police Department. I ran the first DFR program, managed it. We started with one launch location and then ultimately grew it out to 4 launch locations. So I'm with Brink that we built public safety specific drones for DFR and interior flights. So a lot of the challenges that we're seeing across the country is, with the new shielded operations that drone responders in Charles was really, the national working group, which was really a huge push to get that through. Agencies don't have money to budgets to stand up infrastructure for, ground-based radar and optics or whatever it is. So, ultimately, and I've said this all along, is, cities that want to do drone deliveries and all of these other things, it should be one ecosystem that public safety can tap into to show how that's doing. We all hoped Part 108 was going to be that magic solution to all of these things, and Charles immediately scratched his head, so I knew that was he got awkward sitting there. So I think ultimately, kind of right now, we have a huge win for public safety with the shielded operations up to 200 feet, with a ASTM parachute and anti-collision lights and ADS-BN. So I think that's a lot of value. But where we go from here for longer ranges, that connectivity issues for those rural agencies that want to do drone as a first responder, but there's no infrastructure for that is the huge question for the panel.
Well, thank you so much for calling in as well, making that happen. Appreciate it. And to your point, that's a lot of the work Michelle has been doing, and I've been involved in some of these projects as well, where it's many stakeholders at a city that include law enforcement, and it's pretty cool to see how some of that's coming together, right? Where a lot of folks can benefit from, as you mentioned, like ground-based radar. Well, let's put it at this strategic, GA airport or something, and they want economic development expansion, but then it gives coverage over certain neighborhoods that the law enforcement agency next door wants to actually leverage their drones for first responder. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Charles.
Yeah, so I'm Charles Werner. I'm the Director of Drone Responders, and excited to be here. We are now 50 members from reaching the 12,000 mark of members, so it's kind of an exciting time. We are the largest and leading nonprofit program in the world at this point to move advanced technology forward, both on enabling and countering. We do these co-located events because it gives us an opportunity to go in places that are closer to where people are. So we have a variety of those, in addition to our state conferences that are starting to pop up. We now have 4 state chapters. So commercial UAV is that chance we get a chance to blend people coming to talk about public safety issues to be able to share the issues of enabling, countering, and the regulatory side of things, in addition to being able to get public safety to see some of the technology that's now available to take advantage of. So I think that it'll be a great opportunity. Having said that, as we move into this whole regulatory space, and the big elephant in the room now is Part 108. And I think I made a statement in one of the last webinars that Part 108 was a train wreck. And I want to qualify that a little bit. It was a train wreck in respect to the public safety and how that was done. And I think what happened was some things were written probably 2 years ago, and we've sat back and waited for this to come out, and it really didn't evolve with the things that have happened so quickly here recently. But I think going forward, the opportunity is there under the comments section, and this is what's really important to capture, is that that we collectively bring our voices to be heard, so that, to what Michelle said, is a lot of stuff we don't fit into that typical mold. So now let's specify how we don't fit into that mold and what we need to do to move there, and have the conversation with the private industry, with the delivery companies, and those to say, how can we get to a place that we're both getting what we need? Because I know in the sense that the large delivery companies that are going to be benefiting from this don't want to interfere with public safety operations. That's not their intent. So the question is, how do we do it? So under Part 108, there is a civil interest section. And I think what they originally intended, at least this is what I'm told, is that was going to be the Part 91 alternative. That was going to be how Part 91 was going to fit into Part 108. I don't see that the way it's written now that it fits that way. So how do we do that? And my idea is that we take what we've learned and what we've done from both Part 91 and Part 107 and mash that into the civil interest section, so that we don't lose anything that we've gained. Because if you look at Part 108, and this is just an observation, is it's designed largely for delivery companies that are working for profit with large fleets. And there's some assumptions that this will be fully automated, that it will not have a pilot in the mix, and there's no prioritization for public safety in those discussions. I look back, this is kind of similar, and a couple of people give me this analogy that cars first started driving up and down the roads, and we didn't have law enforcement vehicles and those kind of things. And suddenly those things got introduced, and we had to develop the prioritization. So we need to learn from what we know now. And somebody's asked me, what do you want in the way of prioritization? And I'm basically saying similar to what we have on the ground. when you see us coming and you know it's us, we need you to move out of our way. Now on the ground, you've got a left or right alternative. When you're in the air, you've got left, right, up and down, or land. So there's different options of how we can do that. I think we can get there. The other part is there's an issue with the whole prioritization, and that might be getting through these automated data service providers that are referenced in Part 108. And how do we get there? Can we work with the for-profit companies to maybe offset the cost for public safety to be on these data service providers? Because that creates that network version that was kind of talked about when we started doing remote ID. It was an alternative of, do we do just the direct or do we do the network? And this, I think, fills in that gap of how do we all connect? And then we're able to do that, detect and avoid, without having some kind of specific technical solution. So I think there's a path forward, and drone responders will be providing comments out through our blog, so that if you're interested in helping to amplify that voice, that'll be out there for you so that we can have a commonality. If you have specific concerns that you want to send to me, send it to charles@droneresponders.org. I'll pull it in the mix so that we can put those comments together. And we will be sharing that with other organizations as well, so that we can make sure that our message is loud and clear and unified.
So I want to call out the difference between right of way and prioritization. So right of way in aviation is kind of like on the road where you pass on the left, right? This is how we merge. It's structural. It's different. When you have Air Force One in the airspace, we're not giving them right of way. We're giving them priority operations. They still have to comply with all right of way should someone else come towards them. Yeah. They're picking up on that in the language of the NPRM, and there's a misunderstanding of the intent of that language. That language is very specific to 91-113. It's aviation regulation we already know, and it's part of our structure. It's not the prioritization that we're really talking about. That still needs to be shaped, and that would be part of the commenting. Is any aircraft in the air must follow right-of-way rules, whatever those rules are, and there needs to be more consideration, more thoughtful discussion around public safety prioritization. We already have aviation prioritization, and it works very well. We should be talking about this additional layer.